All right, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. Thank you for tuning in. This channel is for educational purposes and really for alternative educational purposes. We try to hook you up with info that you wouldn't get other places and that you have to do a lot of digging to get to. And as a result, some of this information requires some digging from the audience as well. Um, could be kind of esoteric or enigmatic, difficult to understand, requiring some mental effort, but even more so emotional effort, because some of this stuff just kind of challenges your cherished beliefs. And you have to kind of be, um, ready to go after the truth as opposed to what feels good for you, what you like. And this is a segment we have called Bible Decode. This is number 514. And we certainly look at things that your priest, pastor, rabbi, pope don't want you to know about and won't talk about. Subjects that are verboten. And in particular, we've been delving into things like the Dead Sea Scrolls, but even more, the Roman origins hypothesis for the New Testament. That is, that the New Testament was written by the Roman Caesars of the Flavian dynasty in the late first century, not by some illiterate Aramaic speaking people in Palestine, but by some very highly literate Greek speaking, um, very connected, wealthy, with unlimited resources uh, folks in Rome. And they did so as a psychological operation against the Jews. They had just gotten done fighting the Jews for 7 years in a long war. And really, with the broader, the what do you call it? The long view of history, they have been warring with the Jews for over 100 years. One insurrection after a revolt, after an uprising, after a war, over and over and over again. The Jews kept coming back in spite of getting defeated. And they were utterly destroyed in this war. From 66 to 73 AD, the Temple of Jerusalem was torn down brick by brick or stone by stone, and they were completely decimated. Some historical estimates are over 1 million Jews dead. I don't know about that, but a whole lot of them. And really, that it was the biggest killing of Jews, except for the Holocaust, of all time. And um, but the Flavian emperors, Vespasian and Titus, who were both veterans of this war, they knew that the Jews would come back. And so they wanted to kind of channel the Jews into a more passive role, to get them to get with the program of the Roman Empire. All of the other nations in the empire did better to kind of blend in. The Romans were very tolerant of your religion, but they just wanted you to give a nod to Caesar. And that's where the Jews just couldn't do it. The Jews couldn't give a nod to Caesar and would rather die first. And, as part of their monotheistic ideal and their chosen people ideal and their separatists, xenophobic ideal, all of the strictures that they have with their diet and the circumcision and the observance of the Sabbath. These were all things that were sticking points that prevented them from integrating with the whole Roman system. And the Romans were trying to erode that, and so that the Jews would blend in. And so they took advantage of the fact that the Jews were waiting on a Messiah. And in fact, a few self proclaimed messiahs were the authors of this revolt in Judea in 66 AD. And so, you know, the Romans, the Jews were waiting on a military messiah, somebody who was going to overthrow the Romans militarily. And this Messiah was going to be distinctly human, um, not a son of God, which is a completely pagan idea. And but instead, the Romans did propose a Jewish Messiah who was a son of God and who was a prince of peace and believed in rendering unto Caesar and walking the extra mile and turning the other cheek. And at the same time, castigating the Jews for uh, selling small animals at the temple for the sacrifice. He overturned the tables of the money changers, the Jewish money changers at the temple, who were changing out the kosher money for, or the blasphemous money of the Romans for the kosher money of the Jews, so that it could be offered in the temple. And advising his Jewish followers to abandon their families and whittling away at the Jewish traditions and rituals, including the Ten Commandments, the observance of the Sabbath, the circumcision, the kosher food laws, um, and just the separatist ideals, um, calling the Pharisees a den of vipers. So this is a highly, highly unlikely Jesus that any Jewish person would ever act like that. Um, but not only does Jesus act like that, but Paul acts like that as well. And so this certainly raises red flags, or should raise red flags with the authenticity of the story, because it's just something that just wouldn't happen. Not to mention the fact that the story is written in Greek, and very few people in Judea wrote in Greek, and the Jews had no control over what they needed to do to be able to propagate these gospels. The Romans had a monopoly on publishing, distribution, and censorship. And so, really, if it's going to be published in the Roman Empire, it's going to be under the auspices of the Romans. Um, and so, over the course of the last 150 years or so, many, many, many historians have kind of figured this out. And because there are telltale signs throughout, not only the Gospels, but if you read the history of this war by Josephus, and other histories, the histories of Tacitus, Suetonius, and others, the writings of Pliny the Younger, you can see that they're concealing, um, you know, some something doesn't look right. There's just a lot of correspondences between the two, a lot of patterns, a lot of riddles and enigmas and word games and so on between the classical Roman authors and the Gospels. And um, so there have been a number of books on this subject, but none of them seem to attract any attention of any Christian that I've ever seen or talked to. Um, this truther, so-called truther movement that has been going around for the last 11 years or so, even longer. Um, I've been following it for the last 11 years, and I have never heard even a mention of the Roman origins hypothesis. It's like it doesn't exist, but it is a thorough undercurrent of literature out there. And one of the books is by James Valliant and James Valliant and C.W. Fahy, and it is called "Creating Christ: How the Romans Invented Christianity." And this book goes into all that I just referred to, but it also looks at the kind of archaeological numismatic aspect, and because their interest was most piqued by discovering ancient coins minted by Emperor Titus of the Flavian dynasty around 81 AD that featured him on the head side. On the tail side was an anchor with a dolphin or a fish or dolphin wrapped around the anchor. And lo and behold, what a lot of Christians don't know is that the cross was not really adopted as the symbol of Christianity until about the early 4th century AD. So a couple hundred years after the kind of beginning of Christianity, they adopted the cross. But prior to the cross, Jesus was often symbolized as a fish, and the Christian iconography often featured an anchor and fish combination. And so, the question is, why are the Christians using the same set of symbols at the same time as the uh, Flavian emperors of Rome, who we are told are busy feeding these Christians to lions in the Colosseum? So kind of identifying with them doesn't seem to be good practice. And so that's what they're digging into. And I think we are still in chapter 2 of this book. Just got done kind of going through some of the kind of innovations of what the Romans were putting uh, into this into this faux or psyop version of a Jewish um, Messiah story. Okay, much can be learned about the values promoted by the Roman Empire under the Flavians by their coins. The coins of Domitian, Titus's younger brother, who did not participate in the glorious triumph over Judea with his father and brother, also depict Serapian temples and Serapis. Now, Serapis was this syncretic god, a government created god that was created by the Ptolemaic um, rulers of ancient Egypt, really, once Egypt became a Greek um, colony. So the Temple of Serapis is in Alexandria, Egypt, and this was kind of like instructive for the Flavians and for the other Roman Caesars that, as an example of government created religion. It was a combination of many of the some of the Greek gods and some of the Egyptian gods. So make a combination of your gods and the civilization that you have conquered. Put their gods into it too, And so it's kind of a mixture, and then that can appeal to everyone. And that's kind of what the Romans were all about. And, the idea ultimately was this universal religion. And that, the word for universal is Catholic. So that's what they were shooting for. And this religion of Serapis was a kind of a precursor and an influence on the Caesars. It is understandable why Serapis, so closely associated with Isis, would be venerated by Domitian. He had hidden inside the temple of Isis and escaped, disguised as an Egyptian priest, when Vitellius's war for the imperial seat with the Flavians raged in Rome itself. And that was part of the Roman Civil War of 68 and 69 AD, just before the Flavians took the throne. Vitellius was the last emperor before that, and they killed Vitellius, and then Vespasian took over. Domitian was forever grateful, therefore, to Isis, and on one of his monuments he is even depicted wearing Egyptian garb. Serapis, being associated with Osiris, the husband of Isis, often shares a temple with her. Domitian also associated the mother goddess Isis with the Roman goddess Minerva, the Virgin, as we can see from 3 adjoining temples that he built to both goddesses and to Serapis. Noticeably, Domitian's coins changed the subject from the gods and symbols advertised on his father's and brother's coins. To an extent still argued about among scholars, Domitian seems to have favored more traditional Roman gods like Minerva and Jupiter instead, at least more than did his immediate predecessors Vespasian and Titus. So Vespasian is the father of both Titus and Domitian. Those are the only 3 Flavian emperors. Domitian even depicts himself hurling Jovian thunderbolts at his enemies on his coins and architecture, a striking departure from the iconography of his father and brother. Titus and Vespasian wanted to be seen as healing the Roman world both through their victory in Judea and through Vespasian's ending of the civil wars of succession after Nero's death, whereas Domitian played no part in those triumphs. So Vespasian's identification with both Apollo and Serapis, like Titus's, served this political purpose. Vespasian's own propaganda presented him as the new Serapis, and other coin issues struck during Vespasian's reign celebrate this identification, as we can see from this coin featuring Vespasian and Serapis. And as they talked about in last episode, Vespasian was famous for some miracles that he performed at the Temple of Serapis. And these 2 miracles happen to be identical to miracles that Jesus performed. One is the curing of a man with a withered hand, and the other is the curing of a blind person by rubbing his spittle together with some mud or whatever, some clay, and rubbing it in his eyes. And so these are exactly the same feats that Jesus performed in the New Testament. They were performed by Vespasian at the Temple of Serapis and recorded by Suetonius, Tacitus, and I believe that Josephus as well. Vespasian's identification with Serapis suggests that his cult's devotees prayed to him for health or the health of loved ones. Also, because of Serapis's connections to the gods of the afterlife, they would have probably prayed to Vespasian for a happy afterlife as well. When a deadly plague broke out during the reign of Vespasian's eldest son Titus, the new emperor issued coins that honored both Apollo and Serapis to supplicate the gods for relief and healing. Titus kind of he had a he had a tough go during his reign. He was his father Vespasian died in 79 AD, so he took the throne in 79 AD and promptly had to deal with the eruption of Mount Vesuvius at Pompeii and Herculaneum, which killed, how many ever people. And then he also has this plague that breaks out. He was only Caesar for just over 2 years. So, um, and then he died under mysterious circumstances. A lot of people think he was killed by his brother Domitian. Salus, Salus, meaning safety or health, and the Latin root for the English word salvation, was herself a divine daughter of Asclepius. And Asclepius was a Greek god of healing. At one time, Salus was performed, was worshipped in her own temple on Rome's Quirinal Hill, and according to Pliny the Elder, with a statue in the temple of Concordia, the goddess of harmony. Salus, who came to be associated with the health, safety, and welfare of the people, was celebrated on Roman coins like this issue. So just, Titus on the front and a, kind of healing pose on the back, where it says, I don't know what it says there in the inscription. The salutary benefits brought by the Caesars had been celebrated on coins at least as early as Tiberius's Salus Augusta coins. And Tiberius was the emperor from 14 to 37 AD. He was the emperor during so-called Jesus's time, his ministry. It says in the New Testament that Jesus's his work started in the 15th year of Emperor Tiberius. So that would put it at 28 or 29 AD. Harmony herself was also a regular on Roman coins, as in this Titus issue. And, this is, another coin that says harmony, I believe, on it. Faith, hope, and charity, in Latin, fides, spes, et caritas, are regarded as three primary virtues of Christianity. This is based on the famous passage from St. Paul in 1 Corinthians. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Love is usually understood in the sense of giving in this context. The word charity is sometimes substituted for the word love, as in the King James Bible translation. Each of these cardinal virtues is celebrated in Flavian currency as well. For example, the New Testament famously defines faith. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. The goddess Spes, S-P-E-S, or hope, commonly appears on Roman coins. In the following, she is on the reverse side of the Titus issue here, Titus and hope. And so this is the god Spes. Some Christians may believe that compassion, including Christian altruism and charity, were articulated for the first time by Jesus Christ against a backdrop of Roman brutality. However, this is clearly not the case. For evidence of this, we may look to Pliny the Elder, who was an intimate friend of both Vespasian and Titus. And Pliny was actually killed at Mount Vesuvius or Pompeii. Gaius Plinius Secundus, better known as Pliny the Elder, was a highly educated Roman general and statesman who had served with and befriended Titus in the Roman army stationed in Germania during Nero's reign. He was also uncle and adopted father to Pliny the Younger, who would later write the famous letter to Trajan asking clarification on the policy regarding Christians, which we examined earlier. And Pliny was a big player in the writing of the Gospels, Pliny the Younger. Um, One thing I wanted to point out is that, at least to me, uh, this this psyop that I'm talking about, that the Romans were the true authors of the New Testament, I equate it to kind of like the Roman version of the Manhattan Project. The the Romans like really put like all hands on deck for this. All of the intellectuals of the empire, the entire court was involved in this over the course of a few generations, not just during the Flavian dynasty, but even afterward, where Emperor Trajan um, and Emperor Hadrian both may have been involved. So, this was, and it may have even started before the Flavians took power with the writing of what you would call um, the Q manuscript that kind of was an influence on both Matthew, Mark, and Luke. That was that we've never found a copy of it, but it appears as if a lot of Mark's influence in writing was a Latin influence. So Mark was basing a lot of his gospel on another source that was in Latin, and which is the language of the Roman upper class, like the Caesars and the court. They were all like bilingual, and that also plays a part here. But so this was a gigantic project. This Q document probably dated back 20 years earlier, and there's certainly a lot of evidence that Emperor they pitched the idea to Emperor Nero, and he wouldn't go for it, and so as a result, they tried to kill Emperor Nero. He found out about it, and he killed them, and that includes Gaius Piso, and it also includes Seneca the Younger, who was at one time Nero's official tutor when Nero was a young child. And in the end result, Nero had him executed for this plot to assassinate Nero in order so that they could find an emperor who was favorable for this new universal religion that they were pitching. So Seneca also, Lucan was also executed. So that was in 65 AD. So this goes back before the Flavian dynasty started. Okay, back to the text. In fact, the Emperor Trajan himself, on the other side of that historic correspondence, was the son of one of Vespasian's generals in Judea. These relationships may help explain the tolerance and delicacy with which both Trajan and Pliny the Younger handled the Christian question some 20 years after the religion's popularity had declined. And I have grave doubts about all of that. I don't believe that, in spite of all the resources that the Romans put into pumping up this Christian thing, and I think they wrote these things as plays to be performed in front of the masses, especially the Jews, but they also tried to apply it to the Gentiles, the illiterate people. They perform these as plays, and they went on barnstorming tours, and Christianity just really never did get off the ground until the fourth century, with Emperor Constantine when he made it legal, Christianity, and then kind of uh, set a precursor for making it the state religion. That's the Roman Catholic Church, um, and the popes and so on. But prior to that, I think Christianity was a lot of hype and not really a lot of, um, not a lot of reality. And so when Trajan and Pliny are having this exchange about how to treat the Christians, these letters were, I believe, from like 112 A.D. This is part of the psychological operation more than it is a reality, in my opinion. Pliny the Elder later dedicated his monumental collection of ancient science, the Natural History, to Titus. While Pliny the Elder did not live to see Titus's full reign, since he died tragically during the eruption of Vesuvius, exactly 2 months after Titus assumed imperial office, his adulation of the Flavian dynasty, including his arguments for its divine status, had already been recorded in his Compendium of Ancient Science published during the reign of Vespasian. According to Pliny, quote, "For mortal to help mortal, that is God. And this is the way to everlasting glory. This is the road that Roman leaders have taken, and it is this road that the greatest ruler of all time is treading, at a pace favored by heaven, along with his offspring, as he brings relief to an exhausted world. This was the ancient way of rewarding those who deserved it, to regard them as gods." Pliny the Elder, end of quote. Pliny the Elder thus credits the Flavians with a fair expression of Christian love in the context of charity, the idea that true glory and godliness comes from helping others. God is love, he argues. Pliny is also directly associating such compassion with both the Roman Empire itself and the Emperor Vespasian personally. Although none of the Flavian emperors had yet died when Pliny wrote this, Pliny is already associating their compassion with their divinity. Now, after both Vespasian and Titus died, they were both deified by the Roman Senate. So they both became gods by law. And that's another important thing to point out, So this is not any type of stretch in any fashion whatsoever. The creation of Christianity is exactly what the Romans would do, and it is exactly what the Romans did do, because the Romans created a bunch of other religions in the first century, including what you call rabbinical Judaism, which was really targeted toward the Pharisaic Jews as opposed to the Messianic Jews, which was they targeted the Messianic Jews for Christianity, and they targeted the Pharisaic Jews for this campus that they sponsored at Jamnia, um, under this guy Yohanan Ben Zakkai. So, uh, you know, the Romans created other religions that have lasted for thousands of years too. Um, so, this is no kind of stretch whatsoever. This is exactly how the Romans would have behaved. And I would say that it's kind of like a stretch to think that they wouldn't have created Christianity, because who else would have? Especially given that it's written in Greek. For other praise of Titus's love and charity in action, We need only to turn to the historian Suetonius's biography of Titus. It begins with this extraordinary assertion: Titus had such winning ways, perhaps inborn, perhaps cultivated subsequently, or conferred on him by fortune, that he became the object of universal love and adoration. That's the end of the quote. Born on December 30th in a small, dingy slum bedroom, according to Suetonius, which I believe that the Vespasian was a royal, and that this is all fake here as well. But whatever. Suetonius uh, testifies to that. Um, Titus is said to have been remarkable for his beauty, grace, and dignity, his phenomenal memory, his talent on the lyre, his which is a stringed instrument, musical instrument, his ability to compose verse in both Greek and Latin with equal ease, even extemporaneously, and his abilities in almost all of the arts of war and peace. As emperor, Titus never took anything away from any citizen, but showed the greatest respect for private property and would not even accept the gifts that were permissible and customary. None of his predecessors, it seems, had ever displayed such generosity. Suetonius also tells us that Titus was naturally kind-hearted, having as a personal rule never to dismiss any petitioner without leaving him some hope that his request would be favorably considered. When a day passed without his helping someone, he is quoted as complaining, "My friends, I have wasted a day." Titus, we are told, made a virtue of his humble background and freely used the public baths in the company of the common people. Now, that very much sounds like propaganda. Now, it does kind of tug at your heart a little bit, but, you know, that is part of the psychological operation. Okay, we're going to stop right there. Like, share, subscribe, comment, contribute, and come back tomorrow for another episode of Bible Decode. Thanks for tuning in today. Have a great day.